What happens when the man who builds rockets to Mars finds himself grounded, by a single gavel? The news broke like thunder on a dry day. Elon Musk to appear in federal court over alleged financial misconduct. It lit up every screen, ticker, and trending hashtag within minutes. No one saw it coming. Tesla stocks dipped. Twitter memes soared. But inside the walls of the federal courthouse in Washington, D.C., things felt very real, and very personal. Elon Musk stood quietly in the marbled hallway, flanked by two attorneys, dressed in a sharp navy suit that didn't quite hide the weight pressing on his shoulders. Behind his calm demeanor, his mind raced. Not because he feared guilt, he knew he was innocent. But because something about this case didn't make sense. At 10:03 a.m., the doors creaked open. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Charles M. Davis presiding. The room hushed as Judge Davis entered, tall, silver-haired, and sharp-eyed. He carried the air of someone used to having the last word. The kind of man who chewed arrogance for breakfast, and Elon Musk, in his eyes, reeked of it. "You may be seated," Davis said curtly. Elon sat. Cameras clicked. Reporters scribbled. The courtroom buzzed with a strange anticipation. The opening minutes were standard enough. Charges read. Pleas entered. Elon's attorney, Marissa Gray, stood to introduce their initial position. Calm, composed. But the tension was already thick. Then, it happened. Judge Davis adjusted his glasses, leaned slightly forward, and said, almost casually. "Mr. Musk, let me remind you, your rockets may reach the stars, but in my courtroom, you're grounded. Understood?" The words hit like a slap. The courtroom gasped. A few reporters smirked. Others looked shocked. Elon blinked. Was that personal? He managed a measured reply. Understood, Your Honor. But inside, something twisted. 7 minutes into the trial, and already it was clear, this wasn't going to be a neutral hearing. This wasn't just a legal issue. It was a spectacle. The insult spread like wildfire across social media. You may have rockets, Mr. Musk, but in my courtroom, you're grounded. Judge Charles Davis. Within an hour, TikToks had reenacted it. Twitter added it to Elon's list of public beefs. But back inside the courtroom, Elon felt none of the online frenzy. Just the heat rising beneath his collar, and a growing sense of being cornered. Marissa leaned in. That was out of line. He's not supposed to editorialize like that. Elon whispered back, he's trying to provoke. We stay focused. The case was strange from the start. The charges involved a series of wire transfers traced back to a SpaceX subsidiary, funneled into offshore accounts allegedly linked to Elon himself. A figure of $187 million was tossed around like it was monopoly money. But Elon had no knowledge of any such transaction. His financial systems were tight, traceable, and clean, obsessively so. That's how he'd kept companies like Tesla and SpaceX afloat under impossible odds. Still, someone, somewhere, had planted a time bomb. As the prosecution presented their early findings, Elon's eyes scanned the faces in the courtroom. The judge's expression was icy. The jury looked neutral, at least for now. The prosecutors were polished, confident. Too confident. They introduced a set of bank statements. Redacted. Questionable. But they matched account numbers allegedly connected to Elon's name. Marissa objected. Objection, Your Honor. These documents are heavily redacted, and their source has not been authenticated. Judge Davis barely looked up. Overruled. Let the jury decide what to believe. Another strike. Elon's mind flicked to a memory, his mother, May, teaching him chess when he was 10. You don't beat the game by reacting. You beat it by seeing 5 moves ahead. He whispered again to Marissa, they're using a pattern. Redact the source, admit the statement, then shaped the narrative. Marissa nodded, furiously scribbling notes. Outside the courthouse, the world was watching. Live commentary streamed in from every major news outlet. Analysts speculated on whether this could be the downfall of the world's most controversial innovator. Conspiracy theories bloomed on Reddit like fungus. Twitter, where Elon had once been king, turned into a circus of hot takes. But inside that courtroom, Elon wasn't playing billionaire. He was just a man trying not to drown in the undertow of something bigger, something darker. When the day's session broke for recess, Elon walked slowly out the side door of the courtroom, cameras flashing like lightning. A young reporter shouted, "Mr. Musk, do you still believe the system works?" He paused. Then turned, looked straight at the camera. "I believe truth always finds its way through. Even when the system's broken." And just like that, he vanished into a black Tesla waiting at the curb. Hit subscribe and comment. Do you think power protects or reveals? This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The soft hum of electric silence filled the backseat of Elon's car as it glided through DC traffic. Outside the tinted windows, protesters, fans, and skeptics lined the sidewalks. Some held signs that read, "In Elon we trust." Others, more cynical, "No one is above the law." But Elon wasn't seeing them. Not really. His mind had traveled somewhere else, thousands of miles and decades back. Pretoria, South Africa. 1984. He was 12. Sitting at the back of a dusty classroom, scrawling code into a notebook while the teacher lectured about colonial history. The other boys had stolen his calculator the week before and smashed it in the courtyard. One of them had said, "You think you're better than us, space boy." He didn't fight back. He never did. Not because he was weak, but because he saw no purpose in it. He preferred silence. Calculations. Dreams of stars and machines. But that day, he had gone home, cheeks bruised, knuckles raw from gripping his bag so tight. His mother, May, had asked him what happened. He shrugged. "I don't belong here." She didn't ask further. She just handed him a small notebook and said, "Then build where you do." That notebook became the start of everything. Elon stared out the window now, the memory still vivid. His name was on everything these days, SpaceX, Tesla, Neuralink, X. But it didn't protect him. Not really. In fact, the name Elon Musk had become so big, so loud, that it often drowned out the human behind it. At the hotel, Marissa was waiting in the lobby, reviewing files on a tablet. "You okay?" she asked, rising to meet him. He hesitated. "Define okay." Marissa offered a half-smile. "Fair. Let's go over what we have." They rode the elevator in silence. Inside the suite, walls lined with documents and diagrams, Elon walked straight to the whiteboard. He stared at the timeline she'd created, dates of transfers, subpoenaed emails, names of past employees. One name caught his eye, Simon Rourke. He frowned. "We haven't heard from him since the first SpaceX funding round." "Exactly," Marissa said. "Which is why it's weird." "That came an account?" "It was opened using credentials that match his old Access profile." Elon blinked. Simon had been brilliant, borderline genius. But he left suddenly, 6 years ago. No notice. No contact. "He ghosted us," Elon murmured. "Never asked for his shares. Just disappeared." Marissa nodded. "Now he's back. At least digitally. We ran a trace on the IP tied to the transfer. It bounced through 7 proxies, but one of them leads back to a satellite phone. Registered in Alaska." Elon looked at her. "And the judge is allowing evidence that ties back to this?" "Not just allowing," she said bitterly. "He's fast-tracking it. Like he's trying to get this case over with before we catch up." There was a long pause. Then Elon said, "I want you to find Simon. I don't care how. Just find him." Later that night, as the city buzzed with legal gossip and late-night commentary shows speculated wildly, Elon sat alone on the balcony, sipping sparkling water, staring at the Capitol dome. His phone buzzed. A message from his brother, Kimball. "Hey. You don't have to prove anything. You're still my hero." He smiled faintly. The two of them had built so much together, from Zip2 to PayPal, and later, solar farms and food systems. He thought about calling. But instead, he typed back. "Thanks. But I think I do." Across the city, in a dim apartment lit only by a dozen monitors, a figure sat watching courtroom footage from earlier that day. The video paused on Judge Davis's face as he delivered his now viral insult. The figure, mid-40s, lean, eyes scanning rapidly, smirked. "Elon Musk," he said quietly to himself. "You still don't get it. This was never about you." He clicked to a different screen, an encrypted chat labeled Obsidian Room. Message received. The trap is working. He's starting to chase shadows. Back in the suite, Marissa was working late when Elon walked in, holding an old photo in his hand. It was from his Zip2 days. In it, he was grinning wide, young, messy-haired, surrounded by computers and pizza boxes. Marissa looked up. "You okay?" He sat down across from her. "Do you ever wonder what you'd be if no one ever knew your name?" She tilted her head. "Maybe. But if no one knew your name, the world wouldn't have changed." He nodded slowly. "But maybe," he said, "that name comes with a target on your back." He placed the photo on the table. "We need to stop thinking like lawyers. We need to start thinking like hackers. Like engineers." Marissa's eyes lit up. "Backdoor logic?" Elon smiled. "Exactly. We're not going through the front door of this system anymore. We're going to reverse engineer the entire attack." And for the first time since the trial began, there was fire in his voice. "What's the one memory that still fuels your fight, even after all these years? Drop it in the comments. And don't forget, this story isn't over. In fact, it's just warming up." The second day of trial began with a thunderstorm, one of those rare, bone-rattling DC downpours that felt more like a warning than weather. Inside the courthouse, the mood was even darker. The media frenzy outside had multiplied overnight. Protesters now stood shoulder to shoulder with Musk supporters, camera crews, and onlookers snapping selfies under umbrellas. One woman held a sign that read, "Elon for Mars. Not for trial." Inside, the courtroom remained stark and clinical. No cameras allowed. Just rows of eyes, journalists, observers, and 12 quiet jurors, each trying to piece together the puzzle of a billionaire on trial. Elon sat at the defendant's table, shoulders squared, expression unreadable. He wore the same style of suit as before, dark, understated, precise. But this morning, his tie was missing. Marissa noticed. "You look less CEO today," she whispered with a smile. "Good," he replied without looking at her. "I'm not here as a CEO. I'm here as a citizen under attack." Judge Davis entered at exactly 9 a.m., robe flowing, glasses perched halfway down his nose. "Let's continue," he announced, voice sharp as steel. "The prosecution may call its next witness." A man rose from the prosecution's bench. Tall, tanned, late 30s. Clean suit. No emotion. He introduced himself as Robert Keene, a forensic accountant hired to investigate the suspicious wire transfers. "Mr. Keene," the prosecutor began, "can you tell the court what you found in your analysis of the SpaceX transactions?" Keene nodded. "Yes. Between August 14 and October 2 of last year, for large transfers totaling $187 million were routed through a shell account registered to a now dormant holding company in the Cayman Islands. The registered beneficiary was traced, indirectly, to an account historically tied to Mr. Musk. Murmurs rippled through the room. Marissa stood. Objection, Your Honor. The term, historically tied, is vague and prejudicial. Davis raised an eyebrow. Sustained. Mr. Keene, stick to the facts you can verify. Keene nodded. Apologies. What I meant was, the account in question used two-factor authentication that matches the encryption signature used in Tesla's executive transfer protocol. That protocol was developed, in part, by Mr. Musk. The implication was heavy. Elon had the keys. Maybe he used them. Elon sat motionless, hands folded. But inside, he was already dissecting every word, every inconsistency. Why would someone use my encryption? Why now? Who still has access? Marissa cross-examined sharply. Mr. Keene, you're aware that many high-level developers at Tesla had access to that same encryption structure before it was phased out? Yes. And that Mr. Musk delegated much of his financial operations to his CFO and accounting division? Yes. Did you confirm whether any of them had access to the company's legacy security layers? Keene hesitated. That wasn't part of my scope. A small win. But it wouldn't be enough. After court adjourned for the morning break, Elon and Marissa stepped into the hallway, a swirl of voices around them. That guy's being fed a narrative, Marissa muttered. Yeah, Elon replied. And the judge is letting it happen. They turned a corner, straight into a man in a blue federal badge. Elon Musk, the agent said. Marissa stepped forward quickly. We're on break. If this isn't official. I'm not here to arrest anyone, the man interrupted. He handed Elon a sealed envelope. Just passing along a message. Off the record. Elon took it cautiously. No return address. When they were alone again, he opened the flap. Inside was a single sentence typed on clean white paper. Simon Rourke is not in Alaska anymore. But Judge Davis was. October 9th, Anchorage. Think about it. His eyes narrowed. Marissa read over his shoulder, stunned. Wait, the judge was in Alaska last fall. That's around the time the transfers happened. Elon nodded slowly. Yeah. And no one mentioned a trip. They looked at each other. A pattern was forming. A dangerous one. Back inside, the tone shifted. Now the prosecution was introducing character evidence, statements from former employees, emails, out-of-context texts. One even showed Elon ranting about stupid regulatory processes in a Tesla group chat. The prosecutor read it aloud for effect. Elon didn't flinch. Do you recall writing that message, Mr. Musk? He looked up. I recall being frustrated with unnecessary delays in safety approvals for our solar batteries. Yes. I said it. And would you say that you have a general disdain for regulatory systems? He tilted his head. I'd say I have disdain for incompetence. Not for regulation. The jury scribbled notes. The judge gave nothing away. But Marissa leaned over and whispered, they're painting you as reckless. They want the jury to feel you think you're untouchable. Then we give them something they can't ignore, Elon replied. She raised an eyebrow. Like what? He tapped his tablet. I'm going to call someone who knows how to hack this system. But legally. That night, back at the hotel, Elon held a private Zoom call with a voice he hadn't heard in years. Didn't think I'd hear from you again, the voice said, grainy and distorted. I need your help, Elon said simply. I think someone's spoofing my access signature. There was silence. Then, you think the judge is in on it? I think he's been compromised. The voice laughed softly. Then you're gonna need more than encryption logs. You're gonna need digital proof of intent. Elon nodded. Can you get it? If the trail exists. I'll find it. Have you ever felt like the truth was buried beneath layers of lies and power? Let us know in the comments. And remember, this story isn't about billionaires. It's about who really pulls the strings. Elon had always trusted systems, until the systems turned on him. By the third day of the trial, something had shifted in the courtroom. It wasn't just the evidence or the headlines or even Judge Davis's sharp-edged tone. It was the feeling. The sense that everyone around him wasn't just questioning his innocence, they were preparing to assume his guilt. Doubt, like a virus, was spreading. The morning began with a procedural slog, a new set of financial experts testifying about the unusual frequency of offshore transfers during the past fiscal year. But Elon barely listened. Because his phone buzzed once in his pocket. It was a single message, encrypted through a military-grade app only a handful of people had access to. Found something. Not on your servers, on theirs. We'll explain later. Be ready. He didn't need to ask who it was. The hacker, his ghost contact from Twitter's old white hat circle, was digging, and digging fast. Marissa noticed his look. Something happened. Elon nodded. I think the game just tilted. At lunch, they met in a small, private conference room on the courthouse's lower level. Elon pulled up a satellite image on his laptop, a modest building in Anchorage, Alaska. Next to it, time-stamped security footage. Judge Davis. Arriving. Alone. October 9th, Elon said. Same day as the second transfer. Marissa leaned forward. What was he doing there? Apparently, nothing official. There's no record of a court trip. No legal conference. No registered case. And nobody noticed. Elon smirked. Nobody was looking. Marissa frowned. Are you saying the judge met with someone? Off the books? I'm saying, Elon replied, there's more here than just a bad prosecution. This whole thing might be a setup. She hesitated, then added softly, you're not being paranoid, are you? He looked her dead in the eyes. I've been paranoid my whole life. That's why I'm still here. Back in court, Judge Davis seemed more agitated than usual. He overruled Marissa's objections twice in the span of 10 minutes and allowed another questionable data exhibit, this time an email thread, supposedly between Elon and an unnamed foreign investor, with vague references to capital movement and offshore shielding. Elon stared at the projection. I've never written that email, he said calmly. Your Honor, this email lacks digital verification headers, Marissa argued. It could have been spoofed or AI generated. Davis didn't blink. Unless proven otherwise, we'll allow the jury to weigh its validity. It was subtle. Legal. And completely devastating. Marissa sat down hard. They're poisoning the well, piece by piece. Elon exhaled. Then it's time to flip the script. That night, back at the hotel, Elon's contact came through on a secure video call. The hacker's face remained masked, just a silhouette against cascading lines of code. I scraped metadata from the court's secure exhibit server, the voice said. Some of the files, the emails, the financial logs, they weren't uploaded by prosecution. They were inserted manually by an admin. And that admin's account was spoofed. Elon leaned in. Spoofed from where? Anchorage. Same day Davis landed there. Silence. Then Elon said, so someone's tampering with evidence. From inside. The voice nodded. Or someone gave them access. Either way, your judge is dirty. Elon didn't sleep that night. He stood by the window of his suite, looking down on the city as rain tapped the glass. DC never really slept either, but unlike him, the city was good at pretending. He thought about every step that brought him here. Every company. Every innovation. Every risk. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a message. You built too much. You moved too fast. Now we slow you down. But Elon wasn't wired for retreat. The next day, he showed up to court without Marissa. She was off-site, filing a sealed motion with a federal oversight committee to begin a preliminary ethics inquiry into Judge Davis. They didn't have proof yet, but they had enough to raise eyebrows. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere shifted again. Today's witness was a familiar face, Greg Whiteman, Elon's former CFO at Tesla. He hadn't spoken to Elon in almost 2 years. Their falling out had been silent, but final. Mr. Whiteman, the prosecutor began, you were CFO at Tesla from 2017 to 2022. During that time, were you aware of any informal or off-ledger financial activities initiated by Mr. Musk? Whiteman hesitated. Then, there were rumors. But Elon didn't share everything with the finance team. He kept certain funds compartmentalized. Can you elaborate? I can't confirm misuse. But I can confirm isolation. He liked keeping control. Elon watched without expression. But inside, something cracked. That wasn't just a lie. That was a betrayal. During recess, Elon sat alone in a side chamber. He stared down at a small notebook. Not digital. Old-fashioned. Handwritten sketches of a new propulsion system he'd been working on for Mars-bound cargo. He flipped a page. Found a quote he'd scribbled weeks ago. If you control the input, you control the output. Own the narrative, or someone else will. He closed the book, stood up, and walked straight out of the chamber, ignoring the bailiff's call. Outside, he dialed Marissa. Get back here. Fast. What happened? They're cutting pieces of me and feeding it to the jury. By the time she returned, Elon had a plan. We flip the burden, he said. We prove tampering. No, he said, we prove intent. Marissa's eyes widened. We prove someone wants you destroyed, not just convicted. He nodded. We find the motive. We name it in court. And Judge Davis? We expose his connection, on the record. Have you ever been betrayed by someone you thought was on your side? Tell us in the comments. Sometimes, the deepest wounds come from the closest places. Every system breaks eventually. The real question is, who benefits when it does? The courtroom was still buzzing from the previous day's testimony. Greg Whiteman's quiet betrayal had left a lingering taste of doubt in everyone's mouths. The jury hadn't said a word, but you could feel it, in the stiffness of their shoulders, the glances that lingered a second too long on Elon's face. But today, Elon wasn't here to play defense. He was here to fracture the very foundation of the case. Marissa arrived with a new file, slim, but nuclear. The metadata dump from our contact, she whispered as they entered the courtroom. Proof that the email exhibit was fabricated and uploaded manually using a backdoor in the court's admin system. Elon's brow tensed. Does it link to Davis? Not directly. But it leads to an IP address in Anchorage, which was registered to a burner device purchased the same day Davis landed. That's enough, Elon said. We don't need a confession. We need momentum. Judge Davis entered as usual, stoic, unreadable, yet somehow colder than before. Counsel, he said dryly, you have the floor. Marissa stood. Your Honor, we move to introduce a motion to suppress Exhibit 41, the email thread entered into evidence 2 days ago. Davis barely looked up. On what grounds? Digital forgery. We have forensic evidence that the file was inserted manually through unauthorized administrative access, evidence not linked to either party in this case. The courtroom hushed. Even the jury looked up. Davis paused, his eyes narrowing behind his glasses. That's a serious allegation, Ms. Gray. It's not an allegation. It's a fact, she said calmly. We're submitting the full forensic chain, including IP tracebacks, access logs, and server anomalies. All confirmed by an independent cybersecurity analyst. The prosecution immediately objected. "This is an ambush tactic." "Your Honor," Marissa interrupted, "if the evidence against my client has been tainted, the court has an obligation to investigate its origin before continuing proceedings." Davis looked pissed. Not flustered, cornered. He adjusted his robe, leaned forward. "This court will take a 15-minute recess. I'll review the motion privately." He slammed the gavel harder than necessary. Outside the courtroom, Marissa looked at Elon. "That was a risk. If he buries this, we're back where we started." Elon nodded. "He won't. Not if he knows we're watching now." And deep down, Elon could feel it, the system wasn't just cracking, it was beginning to panic. 15 minutes turned into 45. When court resumed, Judge Davis's demeanor had shifted. His voice lacked its usual sharpness. There was no eye contact with Elon. "The court has reviewed the motion and accompanying evidence," he said stiffly. "Pending a technical review, Exhibit 41 will be suspended from the record and the jury instructed to disregard it." Marissa didn't smile, but her hand gripped Elon's wrist under the table. That was the first real win. And it wouldn't be the last. During cross-examination of a new witness, a data analyst working for the prosecution, Marissa went for the throat. "Mr. Hall, did you personally review the authenticity of the email metadata attached to Exhibit 41 before it was submitted?" The man blinked. No. That was handled by a digital evidence technician." "And did you ever meet this technician?" "No, ma'am." "So you're testifying about digital evidence, that you never reviewed yourself, provided by a person you never met, uploaded through a process you never saw." Objection. Sustained. But the damage was done. The jury was listening again. Later that evening, as they sat in the hotel suite, Elon stared at a photo on his tablet, Judge Davis, walking out of a private charter service in Anchorage. No luggage. No staff. Just a single briefcase. "Does this guy look like a judge on vacation to you?" Elon asked. Marissa shook her head. "You think someone paid him off?" "I think someone offered him something better than money." "Like what?" Elon tapped the screen again. "Power. Or freedom." She sat back, thinking. If this is bigger than Davis, we need help. Government level. "I know," Elon said. "I made a call." "To who?" Elon looked up. "To someone who knows how to find pressure points. Especially when they're hiding inside the Department of Justice." Across the city, in a darkened office lined with framed diplomas and polished wood, a woman in a tailored suit stared at a file labeled Musk vs. United States, Judicial Review flagged, urgent. She picked up the phone. "Yeah. I'm in. Get me everything you've got on Charles M. Davis. His finances. His travel history. Personal calls." Quietly. She hung up. And whispered to herself. "If he's compromised, we're about to have a constitutional crisis. Has anyone ever tried to take you down with lies? What did you do? Drop your story in the comments. Because sometimes, the truth doesn't just defend, it fights back. You don't need to plant evidence when you can plant a judge." Rain tapped gently against the hotel window as Elon leaned over the desk, eyes locked on a grainy photo. The judge. A plane. A briefcase. A trip that wasn't on any court calendar. Across from him, Marissa scrolled through a dossier freshly sent from their anonymous contact. 3 payments, she said, voice quiet but charged. All in the same week. Different shell core. All linked to one offshore account. You'll never guess who created the shell companies. Elon didn't flinch. "Let me guess. Simon Rourke?" She nodded. "Our ghost has fingerprints all over them." Simon, former engineer, crypto savant, and the man who once sat 2 desks away from Elon during the early SpaceX years, was the last person anyone expected to resurface. Especially not like this. He's laundering bribes, Marissa said. For whoever turned Davis. No, Elon corrected. He is the bribe. Hours later, in a small, unmarked cybersecurity firm just outside D.C., Elon met with Dara Kim, a digital forensic investigator who once cracked the encryption of a corrupt senator's burner phone. Now she sat across from Elon, swiping through logs and chains of command like a concert pianist playing jazz. Here's where it gets fun, Dara said, pulling up a redacted government PDF. Judge Davis was appointed to an interagency task force in late 2022, small, obscure, supposedly focused on space tech policy. Marissa frowned. So? Dara zoomed in. It was just a cover. The real task force? Surveillance policy, targeting private satellite networks. Including yours. Elon went still. They were watching Starlink. They were infiltrating Starlink. Or trying to. And Davis? He wasn't just reviewing policy. He was their judicial fallback. Their inside man if things went sideways. Elon exhaled. So when they couldn't control the tech, they came for the one person who built it. Dara nodded grimly. Classic chess. Corner the king. Force the board to flip. That night, Elon stared at a glowing Earth model on his laptop, each Starlink node lighting up like a pulse. His system. His vision. And now, their target. He sent a single voice memo to Marissa. We don't just have a trial. We have a weaponized judiciary. This isn't about money anymore. It's about control. And he was done playing defense. The next day in court, Elon took the stand. No warning. No prep. Just bold, calculated chaos. Marissa looked at him like he'd lost his mind. But she trusted him enough not to stop him. I'd like to speak, Elon said. Judge Davis blinked. That's irregular. You're not under examination. I'm requesting the right to make a personal statement for the record, Elon replied, calm and unwavering. Unscripted. Unfiltered. Transparent. A tense pause. Then Davis nodded. 1 minute. Elon stood, adjusted his jacket, and faced the jury. You've heard a lot about who I supposedly am, he began. Emails, transactions, rumors. Some of it sounds true. Some of it's engineered to sound true. But none of it tells you why we're really here. Silence. You could hear a pin drop. I build things. That's what I've always done. From code in my childhood bedroom to launching rockets on borrowed time. I've lost friends, money, and parts of myself to build systems that governments said weren't possible. He scanned the faces of the jury. Now those same systems threaten old power structures. So they built a new one, right here, in this courtroom. A weaponized system. One that doesn't need facts. Just suspicion. He paused. But facts are stubborn things. And this trial? It's about control. Not guilt. If I'm guilty of anything, it's refusing to let the future be dictated by the past. He sat back down. And for the first time since day one. Judge Davis looked shaken. In a side room during recess, Marissa stared at him. That was either the smartest thing you've ever done, or the final nail. Elon looked back. It was both. Across the country, in a sleek underground command center owned by a private intelligence group, a man in a suit whispered into a phone. Activate Simon. Meanwhile, back in D.C., a security guard walked into the courthouse loading bay, carrying a small black envelope addressed to the Department of Justice, Inspector General's office. Inside, a USB. Labeled only, Rourke AK 1.mp4. And the game was about to change forever. Have you ever stood up and told the truth when everyone wanted you silent? Drop your story in the comments. Because courage isn't the absence of fear, it's doing it anyway. Some ghosts don't haunt you. They hijack your future. The video on the USB drive was just under 4 minutes long. Shaky. Grainy. Time stamped, October 9, 2024, Anchorage, Alaska. It opened with a dark parking garage. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead as Judge Charles Davis stepped out of a black government vehicle. He wasn't alone. Waiting at the far end of the garage, standing beside an unmarked SUV, was a tall man in a hoodie and gloves, face partially shadowed. He held a briefcase. No words were exchanged. Just a subtle nod. And then, the handoff. The judge took the briefcase. The hooded man got into the SUV and drove away. The camera zoomed briefly, catching just enough of the license plate and face to trigger facial recognition. In D.C., the Inspector General's office watched the video on loop. The second time through, they froze the frame and called in their forensic team. By the third time, the file was already on its way to the U.S. Attorney's office and the Chief Justice's desk. By the fourth time, someone made a call to Homeland Security. By the fifth, the trial was no longer just a trial. Meanwhile, Elon stood by his hotel window, hands in his pockets, watching a single black SUV parked across the street. He knew it wasn't press. Wasn't paparazzi. It was them. The ones who didn't speak in courtrooms or appear on press conferences. The ones who operated in the gray. The call came 2 minutes later. A clipped voice. We saw the tape. Rourke's real. Davis is compromised. We'll be in touch. Click. No name. But that was all Elon needed. They were listening now. Back in the courtroom, everything changed without a word. Davis took his seat with noticeably less confidence. He kept checking his notes, fumbling his gavel, clearing his throat between rulings. Jurors noticed. The prosecution looked off. Something was in the air. And Elon knew exactly what it was. That afternoon, Marissa called their contact again, Dara Kim, the digital bloodhound. I need you to find everything on Simon Rourke, she said. Already ahead of you, Dara replied. He disappeared from public record 5 years ago. No taxes. No driver's license renewals. No utilities. Not even social media. Dead? Nope. Off-grid, but alive. And moving through corporate shadows like a ghost with a grudge. Where is he now? Dara paused. We traced the SUV in the Alaska video to a rental company owned by a shell corp, based in Baltimore. Marissa blinked. He's here. Somewhere nearby. Or planning something big. That night, Elon left the hotel for the first time in days. No motorcade. No assistant. Just a black ball cap and hoodie. He walked the quiet streets of downtown D.C., breathing in the weight of everything around him. Each step felt like walking a tightrope, one misstep and it all collapses. But something was shifting. The tide was pulling back. He walked past a coffee shop, paused. His phone buzzed. Unknown number. The judge is already lost. But you still have time to win. Meet me. 11 p.m., Union Station. Lower level. Elon stared at it. Then deleted the message. By 11:03, he was standing alone on the lower platform of Union Station, silent, except for the occasional rumble of passing trains overhead. Then a voice behind him. You always were too curious for your own good. Elon turned. There he was. Simon Rourke. Not a memory. Not a ghost. Flesh, bone, scruffy beard, eyes that hadn't changed since SpaceX. I figured you'd be in Belize or some orbital hideout by now, Elon said calmly. Simon chuckled. Nah. DC's where all the action is. And I don't hide anymore. Why the hell are you doing this? Simon stepped closer, eyes gleaming. Because you left people behind, Elon. You built rockets while others starved on the launch pad. You chased Mars while the world burned. Elon shook his head. So what? You frame me. Corrupt a judge. Simon smirked. You built a system no one could touch. So I found someone who could touch you. And now you're bleeding in public. Elon stared. So what's the endgame? Simon's grin faded. You give up the satellites. You walk away. You surrender control. No. Simon's eyes narrowed. Then you lose everything. What would you do if a ghost from your past came back to destroy everything you've built? Drop your take in the comments. Sometimes, revenge isn't personal, it's systemic. Every system has a backdoor. Even a man. Union Station was quieter than Elon had expected. Down in the lower platform, the buzz of city life was muffled by layers of concrete and steel. A place built for motion, but frozen in a moment. Simon stood just a few feet away, hands casually stuffed in his jacket, like he hadn't just confessed to weaponizing a judge and hijacking a federal trial. You've always seen this world in ones and zeros, Simon said, voice calm, measured. But the people in charge? They don't care about code or innovation. They care about control. You forgot that. I didn't. Elon's eyes didn't move from him. So this is what? A lecture? A warning? Simon gave a low chuckle. It's an offer. I'm not here to finish you. I'm here to save you, from yourself. He reached into his pocket and tossed a small black flash drive to Elon. Everything you need is on there. Every backdoor. Every account. Every file you think they're hiding. We built them together. Elon stared at it. Simon continued, you walk away. You retire. You disappear. Quietly. You don't go to prison. You don't lose Tesla. Or SpaceX. Or Starlink. In return, you give up the satellites. A long pause. You want me to surrender Starlink? Elon asked flatly. Not to me, Simon said. To the ones who already run the rest of the world. You think they'll let you keep it? You were never supposed to win, Elon. You just made it farther than most. Elon looked at the flash drive again. His empire, every piece of it, was embedded in those lines of code. Back at the hotel, Marissa was pacing. Elon walked in, tossed the flash drive onto the table like it was radioactive. Simon offered me a way out, he said. Her eyes narrowed. What kind of way out? The kind that lets me walk away clean, and hand over Starlink to the people trying to break me. And, she asked. I said no. Marissa exhaled. Good. But then Elon added quietly, that doesn't mean he's done. The next morning, something unexpected happened. Judge Davis called for a closed-door session, with only the defense, prosecution, and himself present. When Elon and Marissa arrived, the room was tense. Davis sat stiffly, a sealed envelope in front of him. This is a courtesy, he began, his voice lower than usual. Not protocol. He opened the envelope slowly, slid a single page across the table. It was a subpoena. Not for Elon. For himself. Filed by the Office of the Inspector General. Demanding all financial, travel, and communications records over the past 18 months. Davis didn't look at Elon. Didn't say a word about Anchorage. But the subtext was clear. He'd been caught. Outside the courtroom, the press had started catching wind. Sources say the judge in Elon Musk's federal trial may be under investigation. Anonymous video submitted to DOJ possibly implicating sitting federal judge. Could the case be thrown out entirely? And Simon? He vanished again. No signal. No burner phone. Just a name that now triggered alarms in 3 different government agencies. That night, Elon sat in the dark, his tablet lighting up with a text from Dara. "We traced Simon's backdoor to your FalconNet servers. He's still in. He can see everything you see." He replied quickly. "Can we isolate him?" Dara's response came fast. "Not yet. But we can trap him." Elon stared at the screen, a strange calm rising inside him. "Then let's build the trap. If someone offered you power in exchange for your principles, would you take it? Sound off in the comments. Because sometimes, selling out feels safer than standing firm. If you want to catch a ghost, give him something worth stealing." Blinking lights and humming towers, Dara Kim typed rapidly, her eyes scanning code faster than most people could read text messages. "You're sure he'll go for it?" she asked Elon, who stood just behind her, arms crossed, gaze cold. "He's already in the system," Elon said. "Now we make sure it's the wrong system." They were running a full-scale decoy, an exact mirror of the actual Starlink architecture. Network maps, satellite controls, encrypted messages. All fake. But real enough to trick even Simon. Dara pointed at the screen. "We're setting tripwires. Every time he pings a node or queries a subroutine, we tag his IP and watch for lateral movement." Elon nodded. "The moment he thinks he's found something big, he'll dig deeper. And the deeper he goes," Dara added, "the more we box him in." Back at the courthouse, things were unraveling faster than Judge Davis could pretend to control. The prosecution stumbled. Witnesses grew hesitant. The jury, once glued to every damning word, now looked bored, suspicious even. Whispers of judicial misconduct had reached the press. Unnamed sources were leaking details about the Anchorage trip. About sealed financial transfers. About a judge who might not be judging anymore. Marissa leaned toward Elon during a recess. "If they pull Davis off the case, then everything resets," Elon finished. "They lose their edge." Marissa frowned. "Or they double down." That night, Elon walked alone on the roof of the hotel, wind cutting across the city skyline. Below, everything moved, cars, lights, people unaware they were living inside a rigged machine. He looked up. Starlink satellites blinked back from space, silent, watching everything. He tapped his phone, opened a live feed of the honey trap Dara had built. Simon was already inside. Meanwhile, in an old brownstone 2 miles away, Simon sat cross-legged on the floor, laptop open, fingers dancing over keys like a pianist on fire. "Nice move, Elon," he muttered. "But you forget, I helped build this system." He bypassed the first layer of traps easily. The second took longer. The third? He noticed it, but thought it was just sloppy work. And that's when Dara smiled. "Got him," she whispered to Elon. Simon had just activated a remote logging subroutine buried in a mirrored cluster of dummy control scripts. They had his full machine signature. His precise location. His network behavior. His fingerprint. 20 minutes later, Elon and Dara stood side by side in the server room, watching a digital spider web light up on the screen. Every move Simon made was traced. Every keystroke, mirrored. "Should we alert the authorities?" Dara asked. Elon shook his head. "Not yet. Let him go deeper. I want him to think he's winning." Marissa entered the room holding her phone. "They're replacing Davis," she said. "Emergency motion just passed. New judge takes over in 48 hours. Elon's expression didn't change. "They're losing control of the court," he said. "Now they'll come after me directly." Marissa nodded. What's the next move? Elon looked back at the screen, at Simon diving deeper into the fake control logs. We bait him into triggering a phantom satellite launch. One that doesn't exist. A maneuver that looks illegal enough to start a federal investigation. Marissa raised an eyebrow. And when he leaks it? Elon turned. He'll be leaking evidence of a crime he created. The trap was set. A fake document detailing an unauthorized satellite payload labeled Project Seraphim. It suggested Elon had quietly launched an AI-controlled reconnaissance system, autonomous, untouchable, and built to operate outside of U.S. surveillance protocols. In other words, a digital nuke. It looked real. Too real. It was the kind of secret a man like Simon would kill to expose. By midnight, he had already copied the file. By morning, it would be leaked to a contact at a European news agency with anonymous sources and a taste for drama. Elon watched it all unfold in real time. You sure about this? Dara asked. If he goes public with the fake doc, he confirms he's behind the hacks, Elon replied. Then it's not my word against his. It's the system exposing itself. Ever caught someone in a lie so perfectly that they proved your point for you? Drop your best trap moment in the comments. Because sometimes, the truth needs a decoy. A lie is like a snowball. Once it starts rolling, it only grows bigger. By 7 a.m., the email had hit every major news agency. Subject, breaking, U.S. tech mogul Elon Musk's Black Project uncovered. The file, labeled Project Seraphim, was simple enough to get attention. A few high-resolution images, doctored satellite paths, and a cryptic blurb that sounded like something straight out of a spy thriller. The document, leaked by a so-called anonymous source, outlined Musk's supposed secret operation, an AI-driven satellite launch in direct defiance of international space treaties. The message was clear: Elon Musk was going rogue. At his hotel, Elon was pacing when his phone buzzed. It was a news alert. He glanced at it and laughed. Marissa entered the room, already scanning her own phone. So, they've finally decided to pull the trigger. I guess Simon took the bait, Elon said, tossing his phone onto the bed. And now, he's the star of his own conspiracy. By noon, the story was everywhere. CNN, BBC, Reuters, each outlet had its own version of the exclusive, claiming anonymous sources had uncovered Musk's rogue satellite project, citing the leaked documents. The media frenzy grew in intensity, but there was something almost too perfect about it. No one had truly verified the document. It had simply spread like wildfire. And that's when the real fun began. In a dim-lit room off Capitol Hill, a team of intelligence agents stared at a monitor flashing with incoming encrypted data. Wait, this is the data from Seraphim, one of them said. This isn't the actual satellite data. It's a decoy. Damn right it is, a senior analyst replied, eyes sharp. Someone's setting up a trap. And if it's Musk, he's playing us. Should we warn the press? Another agent asked, his voice uncertain. The senior analyst didn't miss a beat. We don't warn anyone. We let them keep running with it. Let them think Musk is cornered. We know he didn't launch this. Meanwhile, Simon sat in a darkened apartment, eyes glued to his laptop screen. He couldn't believe it, his own carefully crafted leak was now spreading like wildfire. The fake documents were being quoted in every major headline, every newscast. He'd made the mistake of thinking Elon was cornered, of thinking that the pressure would break him. But Elon Musk didn't break. Simon's fingers tightened around the edge of his laptop. There was no going back now. At the same time, a very different conversation was taking place in a nondescript building in Langley, Virginia. Inside a secure conference room, a group of high-ranking officials met in the wake of the leak. This could go one of two ways, the lead official said, his voice low. Either Musk is responsible, and we play this hand until he's forced to give us everything, or, we find out who's framing him. One of the others spoke up. Is it possible this is all a setup? A distraction? The senior official stood up, glancing at the projector screen, which now showed the doctored images of the satellite. It's too clean. Whoever did this wants us to think Musk is involved. But I have a feeling he's not the one pulling the strings. This wasn't his play. At 3 p.m. Elon received a call from his legal team. It was the first sign that the authorities were about to get more involved. The Department of Justice has requested an immediate sit-down, his lead attorney said. They're questioning the legitimacy of the leak. They're not sure if Musk is behind it, yet. Elon stood, staring out of the hotel window at the city below. What do we do? Marissa asked, her voice a mixture of concern and determination. We let them come to us, Elon replied. And we'll make sure they know it's not me who's pulling the strings. Let them keep digging. By 5 p.m., a message from Dara lit up Elon's phone. Simon's moving. He's about to throw everything at us, hoping we crack. Don't let him get away with it. Elon read it twice, his mind working quickly. He knew Simon had just made his move, but this wasn't about a simple leak anymore. This was Simon's entire plan unfolding in front of him, and Elon was in the middle of it. Late that night, while the media continued to run with the story, Elon sat in front of a blank screen. He wasn't sure how long he had, but the clock was ticking. Suddenly, a new message pinged into his inbox. It was from an encrypted account, no subject line. Just a link. He hesitated before clicking it. The link opened to a video. A grainy shot, similar to the one he'd seen on the USB Simon had given him earlier. The timestamp was from October 9, 2024, the same night the first meeting had taken place in Anchorage. In the video, Simon Rourke was talking to someone on the other end of the line. Elon's blood ran cold as he listened to the conversation. We're in. He took the bait. Once the leak hits, we go public. Make Musk look like a criminal. No one will question us. We shut him down. The video was the smoking gun he needed. Simon wasn't just framing Elon, he was setting up a much larger game. Elon exhaled, a smile playing at the edge of his lips. Simon had made the mistake of believing the game was about him. It was time to show him who the real player was. Have you ever had someone take a swing at you, only for it to come back and hit them harder? Share your thoughts below. Sometimes the best revenge is making them play their own game. When you light a fire in the forest, you can't always control where the smoke goes. By morning, Elon had already initiated a series of countermeasures. The video he received from Simon's secret conversation, where Simon had essentially confessed to setting him up, was now in the hands of his legal team, encrypted and ready to be made public. It wasn't just leverage, it was the key to turning everything around. But the calm before the storm wasn't just about the video. It was about the bigger picture. The media had run wild with the leak. The fabricated Project Seraphim had stirred a frenzy, but now, Elon was prepared to take back control. He'd had enough of the game being played on his terms, now he was setting the rules. At the Department of Justice, a meeting was underway. The atmosphere in the room was tense, but no one dared to speak as the prosecutor clicked through the pages of the files on his tablet. This isn't just an investigation anymore, the lead prosecutor muttered. This is a full-blown national security issue. If Musk is actually involved in this, if these satellite systems were designed to bypass international regulations, we could be looking at treason. I still don't buy it, one of the agents replied. I've seen these documents. They don't check out. They're too clean. Someone's framing him. Well, whoever's behind this is playing the game like a pro, the prosecutor said, slamming the tablet on the table. We need to catch them. Now. Back at Elon's hotel, things were unfolding quickly. The leak had exploded across social media, with conspiracists already taking to their platforms, alleging that Elon Musk was secretly building a fleet of weapons-grade satellites. But Elon wasn't just waiting around for the government to figure things out. He was about to turn the tables. He met with his legal team via video conference, the screen showing a sea of faces. "We're releasing the Simon Rourke video today," Elon said. "It's time to expose the truth. We need to put pressure on the DOJ and on every news outlet involved in this mess." His lead attorney nodded. "We'll handle the public release. We're prepared for the fallout. But this doesn't just clear your name. It's going to trigger a massive investigation into Rourke's involvement. If he's tied to this, it won't just be your reputation on the line." Elon's expression remained stoic. "I'm fine with that. Simon wanted me to look like the villain. It's his turn to play that part." Hours later, the video was everywhere. News outlets scrambled to verify its authenticity, but it was undeniable: Simon's voice, his confession, the plan to frame Elon Musk. The footage quickly went viral, and within minutes, the public narrative flipped. No longer was Elon the rogue tech mogul trying to escape the law. Now, Simon Rourke was the one under suspicion. In Simon's apartment, panic set in. He'd been following the news all morning, watching as the story about the fabricated satellite program took on a life of its own. But it wasn't the media frenzy that had him sweating, it was the video. The one he thought was safe. He cursed under his breath, pacing back and forth. He'd never imagined Musk would be able to turn the tables so quickly. He'd underestimated him. Then, his phone rang. A name flashed across the screen: Marcus Blackwell. The most powerful investor in the tech world. And his largest backer. "Simon," Blackwell's voice was cold, clipped. "What the hell is going on? The world is watching, and you've gone and made Musk look like a martyr." "I didn't," Simon started. "You didn't. You've been setting him up from the beginning. The video's everywhere, Simon. You lied. Do you realize the implications of this? If Musk gets his hands on the right people, you'll be done." Simon's heart dropped. "I didn't mean for it to go this far. I thought I could control it." "You can't control this anymore, Simon. You're on your own," Blackwell said, before hanging up. The silence in the apartment was deafening. Across town, the government was now on high alert. The leak was no longer just a scandal, it was a potential threat to national security. Agencies had begun scrambling to assess the fallout, and they were no longer looking at Elon as the culprit. The focus had shifted squarely onto Simon Rourke. His involvement in the leak, coupled with his ties to shady tech deals, had created an undeniable pattern of deception. The net was closing in on him. Elon watched all of this unfold from the comfort of his hotel room. For the first time in days, he allowed himself to exhale. He wasn't out of the woods yet, he never would be in his world, but he'd managed to flip the situation entirely. Simon's arrogance and obsession with control had led him right into a trap. "Elon, we've got a problem," Marissa's voice broke into his thoughts. He looked up to see her standing in the doorway, a tense look on her face. "What's happening?" Elon asked. "The DOJ is moving in. Rourke's been linked to several illegal offshore accounts and operations. They've put out a federal warrant for his arrest," she said. Elon leaned back, a small grin spreading across his face. "That's the end of him, then." As the news hit that Simon Rourke was being hunted by federal agents, the media pivoted again. No longer was Elon Musk the villain in the story. Simon had taken that mantle for himself. The public's perception was shifting in real time, with every update on Simon's arrest fueling the fire. And just like that, the story changed. Elon Musk was no longer the man behind the alleged rogue satellites. He was the man who had been framed, and who had outsmarted the ones who tried to ruin him. What goes around, comes around, but sometimes, it takes a while to catch up. The chase had begun. Simon Rourke was now a marked man. The federal government, acting on the information Elon had released and backed by the video evidence, had launched an investigation that was progressing at a terrifying speed. His name was trending on every major news outlet, not as a brilliant hacker but as the mastermind of a deeply coordinated conspiracy to frame one of the world's most influential men. His assets were frozen. His associates were questioned. Even his private safehouses were compromised. Simon was no longer the shadowy tech figure he once was. He was a fugitive, hunted by the very agencies that had once protected him. But Simon wasn't going down without a fight. In a rundown warehouse on the outskirts of DC, Simon sat alone, staring at a dimly lit screen. He had been on the move for days, constantly shifting locations, but the pressure was starting to get to him. His phone buzzed, another encrypted message, this time from an unknown number. "Simon, I can't protect you any longer. You're on your own. You've crossed too many lines." Simon stared at the words, feeling the walls close in. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, his mind racing. "You think you can just walk away from this?" he muttered to himself, the thought of betrayal gnawing at him. He had built this whole thing, but now it seemed like it was slipping through his fingers. He had underestimated Elon, yes, but he had also underestimated the scope of the trap he was walking into. If the government caught him, he was finished. They wouldn't stop until they got every last piece of dirt they could dig up on him. There was only one option left. Back in the comfort of his penthouse, Elon watched the developments unfold on the news. The feds had launched a full-blown manhunt for Simon, and every report seemed to add more weight to the suspicion that Rourke was the mastermind behind everything. The truth was finally coming to light, and it was being broadcast to millions. Elon had been prepared for this moment. For weeks, he'd been playing his part, biding his time, making sure that Simon made the first move. Now that he had, it was time for the final step. Marissa entered the room, a look of concern on her face. "Elon, the DOJ is reaching out. They're offering a deal, testimony against Rourke in exchange for full immunity. They want to use you as their main witness." Elon glanced up, his expression calm. "And what do they expect from me?" "They're looking for anything, any inside information that could lead them to Simon's network of contacts. If you cooperate, they'll drop all investigations into you and your companies. It's your chance to get out of this clean." Elon smiled, though it wasn't a pleasant expression. "I'm already clean, Marissa. But Simon's the one who's not going to make it out." Meanwhile, Simon's escape plan was coming together. He had reached out to a contact in the underworld, a fixer who could get him out of the country and into a safe haven far away from the prying eyes of the U.S. government. But as Simon packed his things, a thought lingered at the back of his mind. He wasn't running to freedom, he was running to survive. Simon's mind raced through the steps of his plan, a false identity, a private jet, and a network of people who owed him favors. But the one thing he couldn't escape was the fact that every move he made, every click of a button, was being watched. At the same time, a message appeared on Elon's phone. A private email from his lawyer. He opened it and immediately saw the gravity of what was being offered. The DOJ wasn't just asking for his testimony, they were demanding that he take control of the narrative. They needed Elon to be the face of the case against Simon, to ensure that the truth about the conspiracy would reach the public. It was a delicate position to be in. If he cooperated fully, he could clear his name, but it would mean throwing Simon under the bus completely. The DOJ wasn't offering him an opportunity to be a passive bystander. They wanted him to take an active role in taking Simon down. By late evening, the authorities had traced Simon's last known location, a warehouse just outside of DC. They were closing in. A team of agents had already surrounded the area, ready to move in. Simon was well aware of the hunt. But for him, it was already too late. As he attempted to make his escape through a back exit of the warehouse, he ran into a blockade, a circle of men in black tactical gear. He'd been cornered. Elon watched the live news feed from his penthouse, unable to keep his eyes from the screen. The search had reached a fever pitch. Simon was being hunted down, and the authorities were on the verge of capturing him. Marissa stood beside him. "Elon, this is it. They've got him." "I know," Elon replied, his voice calm, distant. "But it's not over yet. Simon still has one final play left." Back at the warehouse, Simon was surrounded. He stood in the middle of the room, his chest heaving with the weight of his panic. His heart raced, and sweat drenched his brow. The men around him were closing in, the inevitable closing in on him. But Simon was not the kind of person to go down quietly. He would not let this be the end. With one last desperate move, Simon pulled a hidden device from his jacket, a small, sleek tablet. A panic button. It was his last card. He tapped it. Within seconds, a series of encrypted files flooded the internet, untraceable, hidden behind layers of security. His final message to the world. His last act of defiance. A few seconds later, the device was destroyed. Within moments, the authorities stormed the warehouse. But Simon Rourke was gone. The room was empty. It wasn't just his escape that was troubling. It was what he'd left behind, a trail of digital breadcrumbs, files that could either clear him or further implicate him. And now, it was up to the authorities to piece it all together. When the hunter becomes the hunted, the rules of the game change forever. The news outlets were in a frenzy. Simon Rourke's disappearance had left a trail of questions that no one could answer. Was he dead? Had he escaped? Or had he gone underground to plot his next move? What they didn't know, however, was that Simon wasn't merely hiding, he was planning. And his disappearance was part of a bigger play. For the authorities, it was a race against time. After the warehouse raid, all they had found were the remnants of Simon's final defiant act, encrypted files, a handful of digital footprints, and an empty room. A statement had been sent, but the sender was nowhere to be found. Inside the government's command center, agents pored over the evidence, trying to piece together how Simon could have vanished so completely. One agent, his face tired from days without sleep, spoke up. "We need to move faster. We've lost him for now, but there's no telling what kind of data he's left behind. This could be the key to catching him." The others nodded, their eyes locked onto the screen where they were still analyzing the fragmented files Simon had left. But they were running out of time. They knew Elon Musk's legal team had already started to prepare for the fallout from the leak, and with Simon out of the picture for now, their only hope was that they could track down what Simon had left behind. Meanwhile, Elon was in his penthouse, preparing for what was to come. The ordeal was far from over. Simon's last-ditch attempt to disappear had created chaos, but it had also left a dangerous opening. Elon couldn't afford to wait for the authorities to close in. He needed to act quickly. "Elon," Marissa said, walking into the room with a sense of urgency. "We've got word from the DOJ. They want to meet with you today. They say it's about Simon." Elon stood up, his expression hardening. "This is it. They want to turn me into their pawn. I can feel it. They want me to be the one to lead them to him." "And?" Marissa asked, a knowing look in her eyes. Elon looked out the window, his gaze distant. "I'm not going to be their puppet. If they want to catch Simon, they can do it on their own terms. I'll give them the evidence they need to finish him off, but I won't let them control me." Marissa paused, understanding the weight of what he was saying. "Then what's the play?" "The only way Simon stays hidden is if no one is looking for him," Elon replied, turning to face her. "If we keep the heat on him, he'll make a mistake. And when he does, we'll be waiting." As the day went on, the manhunt for Simon continued to dominate the headlines. The feds had put all their resources into tracking down the hacker-turned-fugitive, but no one had seen Simon in days. His trail had gone cold, and yet, his network was still active, still operating in the shadows. Every lead they followed seemed to point to dead ends. Simon had one major advantage: he knew how to hide. Not just from the authorities, but from anyone who might be looking for him. That night, Elon sat alone in his office, staring at the encrypted files Simon had sent to the internet. He had taken them and decrypted them, revealing what Simon had left behind. It wasn't just a confession. It was a full database of every illegal transaction, every shadowy deal Simon had made with underground organizations, hackers, and corrupt officials. Elon knew that the information was deadly. If Simon thought he could hide behind his digital footprint, he was wrong. Elon had just found the blueprint to take him down, once and for all. He made the call. "We're releasing the data," Elon said, his voice firm. "This ends now." Hours later, the news broke. The data Simon had left behind was not just a simple digital trail, it was an explosive collection of information. Names of people in high positions, secret bank accounts, and evidence of global operations linked to Rourke. The media was on fire. Every outlet carried the story. And with each passing minute, the walls closed in on Simon even more. The DOJ quickly issued another statement, confirming the discovery of this data. The government's position had shifted dramatically. They were now focusing all their resources on bringing Simon in, and they had Elon Musk to thank for the critical lead. But in the shadows, Simon was watching. He'd expected this. It was a calculated move. He'd known that if his escape was going to be successful, he would have to erase all his tracks, and fast. The release of the files had been a last-minute contingency, one he'd been forced to activate when he realized just how far Elon had come. But Simon's plan was far from over. He had his own way of controlling the narrative. And he knew that if he played it right, he could still make Elon Musk's empire crumble. The next morning, Elon received a strange message on his encrypted phone. "Elon, I know you think you've won. But this is far from over. I have the files. I have the network. And I have the power to destroy you. If you think for 1 second you can walk away from this unscathed, you're mistaken." The message was a stark reminder of Simon's unrelenting nature. It was clear that even though the authorities were closing in, Simon was still in control of the situation. This wasn't over, and Elon knew it. "Marissa," Elon said, setting the phone down. "He's not done yet. Simon thinks he can outlast us. But he doesn't realize that the net is getting smaller." As Elon began to prepare for the next move in the game, Simon, deep in his underground hideout, was planning his final strike. He had always been 2 steps ahead, but now, he was playing a different game. And this time, it wasn't just about surviving, it was about winning. In a game where the odds are stacked against you, the final move is the one that changes everything. Simon Rourke sat in a dimly lit room deep beneath the streets of New York, his mind racing. The government was closing in, the media was relentless, and Elon Musk had publicly released the evidence that could destroy his life. Every move he made seemed to push him closer to the edge, but Simon wasn't one to go down without a fight. He had always known that the game would eventually come to this, a high-stakes battle for survival, a battle where only one player would walk away victorious. He glanced at the screen in front of him. His encrypted communication channels were buzzing with activity. He knew that time was running out, and the clock was ticking faster than ever before. His contacts in the underground world were scrambling to cover their tracks, while law enforcement and private security firms ramped up their efforts to track him down. It was only a matter of time before the feds closed in. But Simon had one last trick up his sleeve, a final gambit that could either clear his name or lead him to an even darker fate. It was risky. It was dangerous. But Simon knew that sometimes, to win, you had to take the biggest risks. Meanwhile, across the country, Elon Musk was preparing for his next move. The release of Simon's data had put him at the center of the storm. The DOJ had been in contact all day, pushing him to play a more active role in Simon's downfall. But Elon was no fool. He knew the stakes were higher than ever. He could feel the pressure mounting, but his mind was calm. He had played the game long enough to know that everything had a purpose. Every step he took was calculated, and Simon's next move was already predictable. Marissa entered the room, her face tight with concern. Elon, I just spoke with the DOJ. They want you to make a public statement. They think it will give them the leverage they need to catch Simon. The media is already on the edge of their seats. Elon leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers in thought. And what do you think they'll do with me after that? He asked, his voice low but deliberate. Once I give them everything they want, they'll be done with me. I'll be just another pawn in their game. Marissa paused, the weight of the situation settling in. They don't care about you, Elon. They care about the truth, and catching Simon. Elon stood up, walking toward the large windows of his penthouse, looking out over the sprawling city. He could feel the weight of the world on his shoulders, but he wasn't about to let that dictate his next move. The truth, huh? He muttered to himself. I've never been good at giving them what they want. Back in the depths of his hideout, Simon was preparing for his own confrontation. He had spent days, even weeks, assembling a network of people who owed him favors, people who could help him make one last bold play. He knew that he had a small window of time before the authorities would close in completely. But in that short window, Simon planned to make a move that would shake the entire world. He activated his laptop and typed a series of commands. The screen flickered to life as a secure communication channel opened. His contacts on the dark web were ready. The clock is ticking. You know what to do. We go big, or we don't go at all. The message was simple, but it conveyed everything Simon needed to say. The final move had been set in motion. Simon leaned back in his chair and exhaled deeply. He was about to turn the tables once and for all. This would either be his final act of defiance, or his greatest victory. As the hours ticked by, the media frenzy around Simon grew more intense. The feds were tightening their grip, and Elon was beginning to feel the pressure mounting. He had always been a man of strategy, but Simon's unpredictability made him an even more dangerous opponent. At 9 p.m. Elon received a cryptic message on his encrypted phone. It was from Simon. You think you have everything figured out, Elon. But what you don't understand is this, I've already won. You're just too blind to see it. Elon stared at the message for a long moment, his mind racing. It was a taunt, and it was exactly what he had expected from Simon. But there was something unsettling about it. Simon was no longer just playing the role of the hunted, he was the hunter now. The final gambit was about to unfold. Simon, with the help of his network, had begun to manipulate global financial markets. It wasn't a simple hack or a data breach. No, Simon's plan was far more intricate. He had infiltrated the core systems of the world's financial institutions, planting false information that would trigger a massive market collapse. He knew that the chaos it would cause could shift the balance of power. It would create panic, confusion, and distrust, exactly what he needed to keep the authorities off his trail. While the world's attention was focused on the crumbling economy, Simon would be able to disappear for good. As news outlets began to report on the sudden and unexpected crashes in the stock market, Elon felt a wave of dread wash over him. It was happening. Simon had executed his plan, and it was working. Elon, Marissa said, her voice shaking with concern. This isn't just a crash. This is organized. Someone's pulling the strings. Elon's jaw clenched as he pieced together what was happening. It's Simon. He's doing this. He's manipulating the markets to create a diversion. We need to act fast, Marissa said, pacing. This could destroy everything. Elon's mind raced, but his expression remained calm. He had to think fast. The financial collapse was only part of Simon's gambit. The real challenge now was stopping him before the world descended into chaos. Elon, you need to make a move, Marissa urged. We can't just sit here. We need to stop him before he causes any more damage. Simon sat back in his chair, watching the unfolding chaos on the news. The stock market was in freefall, and the authorities had no idea where to look next. It was the perfect diversion. For the first time in days, Simon felt a sense of satisfaction. His plan had worked. But there was one more piece of the puzzle to solve. He had to disappear completely. The government would come for him soon, but with the chaos he had created, he knew they would have their hands full. It was time to vanish into the shadows for good. In the game of power, there are no rules, only the will to win. The digital battlefield had reached its climax. Financial markets were spiraling into chaos. Stocks were crashing, economies faltering, and the world was on the brink of a financial catastrophe. The cause? A series of coordinated cyber attacks that had originated from Simon Rourke's hidden network. No one had seen it coming, not even Elon Musk. For 48 hours, Elon had been working tirelessly, pulling every resource at his disposal, meeting with government leaders, and coordinating with security teams around the world. The world was crumbling, and Simon was pulling the strings from the shadows. But Elon knew, he couldn't allow Simon to win. Not after everything that had transpired. Marissa stormed into the room, her face grim. Elon, the world is losing confidence. The global stock markets are in freefall. The economy is on the brink of collapse. If we don't act now, we might not be able to recover. Elon turned to her, his gaze determined. I know. But Simon is playing a game he's been planning for years. It's not just about money or power. It's about leaving a mark, making sure his name lives on forever. We need to beat him at his own game. Do you have a plan? Elon nodded, his mind already focused on the next steps. We cut him off at the source. We don't chase him. We disrupt his network and expose him. The moment we break his encryption and shut down his system, we'll have him cornered. Back in the dark, hidden world Simon had created, he sat at his workstation, watching as the world teetered on the edge of collapse. His fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to make the next move. Simon's mind raced, his plan was working. The global financial system was breaking down. The governments of the world were desperate. Elon Musk and his team were scrambling, trying to put the pieces together. But Simon wasn't worried. This was his moment. For years, he'd planned every move. Every step he'd taken, every calculated risk, had brought him to this point. Then came the message. A line of text appeared on his screen, chilling in its simplicity. This is the end game. You're finished. Simon's heart skipped a beat. He knew that voice, he knew who it was. It was Elon Musk. Elon had cracked Simon's encryption. His team had broken through the last of the firewalls and hidden security measures that Simon had set up. Simon had underestimated one thing, Elon Musk's drive to win. The moment Simon had launched his final attack on the financial system, he had unknowingly played into Elon's hands. Marissa's voice broke the silence in the control room. Elon, we've located Simon's digital fortress. It's a cloud-based network, but we've breached the outer layers. We can go in now. Elon's eyes were fixed on the screen. The clock was ticking. If they didn't act now, Simon's final escape plan would be set into motion. Get in there. We need to disable everything. Fast. In Simon's lair, the tension was palpable. He was not the only one waiting for the end. As he readied himself to disappear, his final escape, he received an encrypted message. It was from his backers, the shadowy figures who had funded his operations. They had promised him a way out once his work was done. But this wasn't the escape Simon had envisioned. This was not his victory. Elon had cracked the code. Simon's backers were turning on him. He slammed his hand on the desk, furious. No. This was supposed to be my legacy. His empire of chaos was slipping through his fingers. Elon's team was closing in. The breach was complete, and they had found the data Simon had been hiding. They weren't just exposing Simon, they were dismantling everything he had built, one layer at a time. The financial system would recover, but Simon's reign of terror was over. But Simon had one last card to play. A sudden flicker appeared on the screen in front of him. His systems were being tampered with. Someone was coming for him. Someone had found the last escape route he prepared for himself. He began typing furiously. He had to destroy everything before they could stop him. The data, the codes, everything, he would burn it all. In the final moments, Simon watched as his empire collapsed. The digital fortress, his final stronghold, was disintegrating in front of him. Elon and his team had outplayed him. His secret network was exposed, his plans unraveled. But even as his world came crashing down, Simon had no choice but to admit one thing: Elon Musk had beaten him at his own game. At that moment, Simon realized the truth. His obsession with legacy, with power, had blinded him to what really mattered. He thought that by breaking the system, he could control it. But now, as the digital walls came crashing down around him, Simon understood. Elon Musk had shown him something he hadn't counted on: the strength of the system, the resilience of the people who worked to protect it. Elon stood at the front of the control room, his face hard, eyes scanning the monitors. "It's done," he said. "We've shut him down." Marissa breathed a sigh of relief. It's over. But Elon's gaze remained fixed on the screen. The world was beginning to recover, but something gnawed at him. He'd stopped Simon. But at what cost? The markets would stabilize, the chaos would subside, and life would go on. But the scars from Simon's attack would remain. Elon turned to Marissa. "It's not really over, you know. Simon may be gone, but the cracks in the system are still there. People will try again. We need to be ready." Later that day, the world learned of Simon Rourke's fall from grace. The hacker-turned-mastermind who had almost brought the global economy to its knees was captured and arrested. The message was clear: no one, no matter how powerful, could break the system without facing consequences. But even as the authorities closed in on Simon, Elon Musk remained vigilant. He knew this wasn't the end. It was just another beginning. The storm had passed. The chaos that Simon Rourke had unleashed on the world had been quelled, his vast network dismantled piece by piece. But despite the sense of relief that should have followed his capture, something lingered in the air. The world had come so close to disaster, and it wasn't just the aftermath of Simon's actions that kept Elon Musk awake at night, it was what came next. The global economy was recovering, slowly but surely. The markets had stabilized, governments were moving swiftly to prevent further damage, and the public was slowly returning to their everyday lives. But the system had been cracked wide open, exposing vulnerabilities in ways that hadn't been anticipated. Simon Rourke might be in custody, but the shadows he'd uncovered remained. Elon leaned back in his chair, his fingers resting lightly on the edge of his desk. The quiet hum of the room was a far cry from the frenetic energy that had filled it only days before. Marissa walked in, her expression thoughtful as she observed Elon. "You've been quiet since the press conference. Everything's technically over, but I know something's still weighing on you." Elon didn't turn around. "I'm wondering what Simon really wanted." "What do you mean?" Elon finally faced her, his brow furrowed. His attack, it wasn't about money or even power. It was personal. He wanted to break something bigger than just the financial markets. It was a challenge for him, a test of control, to prove that he could shape the world into what he wanted. Marissa paused, processing his words. "So, you think this wasn't just about winning? He was trying to prove a point." "Exactly," Elon replied, standing up and walking over to the window. He had an obsession with legacy. He didn't just want to succeed, he wanted to leave a mark, to be remembered as the man who broke the system. Marissa was silent for a moment before speaking. "And you think there are others out there who might try to do the same thing? Test the system?" Elon nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "We can't be naive. There are always people like Simon out there, people who want to control things, who want to manipulate the system for their own gain. But now, with Simon exposed, we know what they're capable of. And that's the first step in stopping them. The next few days were a blur of meetings, calls, and strategic planning. Elon's team worked tirelessly to reinforce the weaknesses Simon had exposed in the global system, while Elon himself focused on something larger. He knew the world couldn't keep operating on a fragile, patchwork foundation. It was time for a change, an overhaul, not just of security systems, but of how society approached power and technology. Elon found himself in a meeting with the world's most influential leaders, politicians, economists, and visionaries, discussing the new framework that would help prevent future catastrophes like Simon's. The stakes were high, and the room was tense. "We've seen what happens when someone exploits our weaknesses," Elon said, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "The global economy, the technological landscape, it all operates on trust. And Simon proved that trust can be shattered in an instant. If we don't act now, we risk being vulnerable to the next Simon who comes along." A delegate from Europe raised his hand. "So, what exactly are you proposing?" Elon paused, collecting his thoughts. "We need a global initiative, an organization that transcends borders, one that focuses on both technological development and security. We need to build a stronger system, one that isn't just resilient but can actively anticipate and prevent the kind of manipulation Simon tried to pull off." "And who will lead this initiative?" another leader asked. Elon's eyes were unwavering as he spoke. "Not me. We need a coalition of minds, leaders from all walks of life, who are committed to keeping this world safe and moving forward, no matter the cost. The system needs to be global, transparent, and cooperative." The room was silent for a moment. The idea was radical, but Elon had never been one to shy away from bold moves. Back at his headquarters, Elon was pacing back and forth in his office, lost in thought. The press had stopped talking about Simon Rourke for the moment, but the damage Simon had done still hung heavy in the air. The technology that had once felt like a tool for liberation now felt fragile, like a glass vase on the edge of a table, teetering, waiting for the next gust of wind to shatter it. Marissa knocked and entered, bringing him back to the present. "You've been pacing like this for hours. What's on your mind?" Elon turned to face her, his voice quiet but intense. "I can't shake the feeling that Simon wasn't just trying to break the system. He was trying to show us how easy it is to break it. He's given us a blueprint for our own destruction." She frowned. "You think someone will take his place?" Elon nodded. "I'm not just worried about the next Simon Rourke. I'm worried about the ones we can't see coming. There are always people, groups, who want to control things. We can't just rebuild, we have to rethink everything." "Rethink everything? Like what?" she asked. Elon walked to the window, looking out over the city below. "We need to create a future where the world is designed to anticipate threats, to innovate, to grow, and most importantly, to protect itself from manipulation. We need to build systems that are smarter, more secure, and capable of evolving faster than any threat could catch up." Marissa nodded slowly. "It's going to take years." "I know," Elon replied, a spark of determination in his eyes. "But we don't have the luxury of waiting. The world needs to adapt. And if we don't lead the charge, someone else will. And they might not have the best interests of humanity at heart." As the days turned into weeks, Elon worked tirelessly, assembling a team of the world's brightest minds. They were tasked with creating the first truly autonomous and secure system, one that would evolve and adapt, a system that would be capable of identifying potential threats before they could even materialize. This new initiative, which he called the Shield Project, would be Elon's legacy, not just a vision for the future, but a promise to the world that no one would be allowed to manipulate or control what was meant to be shared. The project would take time, but Elon knew it was the only way to safeguard against the uncertainty that lingered in the wake of Simon Rourke's fall. As he watched the sun set on the horizon, Elon finally allowed himself a moment of peace. The battle had been won, but the war for the future of humanity was just beginning. And for the first time in days, he felt a sense of hope, a hope that this time, the world would be ready. It had been a few months since Simon Rourke's arrest, and the world was gradually returning to normal. Markets were bouncing back, economies were recovering, and governments were beginning to stabilize. But despite the outward calm, there was a sense of quiet tension, a feeling that something new was on the horizon. Elon Musk couldn't shake the feeling that the true impact of Simon's actions was only beginning to show. The SHIELD project was well underway. Elon and his team were making progress, developing a new system that would guard against manipulation and deception in the digital age. But as they worked, Elon had come to realize that Simon had set something else in motion, something far bigger than anyone could have anticipated. The seeds of change had been sown, and now the world would have to live with the consequences. Elon sat at the head of the table in a large conference room, staring at the digital blueprint projected on the wall in front of him. Marissa was sitting next to him, her expression serious. "We've made progress, but we're still a long way from implementing the SHIELD project globally," Elon said, his voice low but determined. "This isn't just about creating a security system, it's about redefining how the world operates. We're not just protecting data, we're protecting trust." Marissa nodded. "And the challenge is that trust has been broken. Simon's attack wasn't just a breach, it was a wake-up call. People have seen how fragile the system is. They're starting to question everything. Governments, corporations, they're all scrambling to regain control." "That's exactly it," Elon replied. "The longer we wait, the more fractured the trust becomes. People will find new ways to exploit the system, and the chaos will only escalate." Just then, the door opened, and one of Elon's top engineers, Kevin, stepped in. "Elon, we've got a problem," he said, his face tense. "There's been a massive leak of sensitive information. We traced it back to a new group, a decentralized network of hackers. They're using Simon's tactics, but they're more organized, more methodical. They're not just after money, they want influence. And they've started targeting global power structures." Elon's eyes narrowed. "How widespread is it?" Kevin shook his head. "It's still early, but they're targeting governments, financial institutions, and tech giants, companies like ours. They're spreading misinformation, destabilizing markets, and even planting false data to cause social unrest. It's like Simon's playbook, but with a more sophisticated touch." Elon stood up, his jaw clenched. "We can't afford to be caught off guard again." Marissa looked at Elon, concern in her eyes. "Do you think this is just a ripple from Simon's actions, or are we looking at a new player altogether?" Elon paused, thinking carefully. "It's both. Simon opened the door, but now there's a whole new wave of people who see the cracks in the system. This is bigger than one man, it's a movement." The ripple effect was real. What Simon had set in motion with his attack on the financial system had reverberated far beyond the immediate aftermath. The world was changing, and not everyone was content with the way things had been restored. As Elon and his team dove deeper into investigating the hacker group, they discovered that the new players were far more than just opportunistic criminals. They were a loose coalition of individuals, anarchists, and ideologues who had seen Simon's manipulation of the financial system as proof that the world was fundamentally flawed. They believed that the current global power structures, governments, corporations, and institutions, were inherently corrupt and needed to be dismantled. The group had no central leader, but their ideology was clear. They wanted to topple the established order, to break the very systems that had once been relied upon to maintain order. They wanted to create chaos, to force the world to question everything it had built, in the hopes that from the ashes, a new world order could rise. Elon was stunned. It wasn't just a few rogue hackers causing trouble anymore. This was a movement, a philosophical battle for control of the future. And just as he had once been motivated by a desire to innovate and change the world, these new players were motivated by a belief that the world needed to be torn down first, in order to be rebuilt. Elon called an emergency meeting with his inner circle, and they gathered in the sleek, minimalist boardroom that had become the headquarters for the SHIELD project. This group, whoever they are, they're more than just hackers, Elon began, his tone serious. They're ideologues. They see the collapse of the system as inevitable, and they want a force that change sooner rather than later. Kevin leaned forward. We've already seen some of their tactics. They're using the same methods as Simon, but they're also leveraging a deep network of followers who believe in their cause. They're spreading messages of chaos and revolt, and they're doing it in ways that are almost impossible to trace. They're using encrypted communication channels and anonymous platforms. Marissa, her arms crossed, spoke up. Do we know who they are yet? Elon shook his head. Not specifically. But we know they're starting to make moves in key areas. They're influencing social media, creating fake news, and pushing narratives that fuel division. They're taking advantage of the chaos Simon created to spread distrust even further. We need to stop them before they tear everything down, Marissa said. Elon nodded. We're not just dealing with a threat to the system anymore. We're dealing with an ideology that wants to see it all burn. If we don't act quickly, this could spiral out of control. The next few weeks were a blur of activity. Elon and his team worked around the clock, devising strategies to counter the new threat. They had learned from Simon's attack, this time, they wouldn't be caught off guard. But even as they moved to secure the digital infrastructure, Elon knew that the real battle wasn't just in the code, it was in the hearts and minds of people. This new group, this decentralized force, was tapping into something deep. They weren't just targeting systems, they were targeting beliefs. The very foundation of what people believed about power, about control, about the future of society. And in a world that had already seen the collapse of a financial empire, it wasn't hard to see how many could be swayed by their message. As Elon walked through the halls of his headquarters late one evening, his mind raced. What did the future hold? Could they build something strong enough to weather the storm? Or was the world too far gone, too fractured, to ever return to the way it was? One thing was certain, nothing would ever be the same. The world is divided not by borders, but by the ideas that separate us. The world had entered a new phase, one that no one had expected, even after the chaos Simon Rourke had caused. While governments scrambled to maintain control, the people began to fracture, not just by geography or wealth, but by ideology. The world had never been so polarized. Once, the digital realm had been a source of unity, a space where ideas flowed freely. But now, it had become the battleground of a war for control, and the very fabric of society was at risk of unraveling. Elon sat in his office late at night, staring at the glowing screen of his computer. The map in front of him showed real-time data from across the globe, tracking the movements of the decentralized group he and his team had been tracking. They were organized, scattered across continents, operating under the radar, and yet their influence was undeniable. What do they want? Elon muttered under his breath, tapping his fingers on the desk. The message from this new group was clear, they wanted change, but the way they were going about it was anything but peaceful. They weren't just hackers. They were ideologues who sought to tear down the systems that had defined the modern world. The world was divided, not just by geographical boundaries, but by the radical ideas that were now taking root in the minds of millions. The message was simple, the current order was broken, and it needed to be dismantled. They were pushing for a future where borders, governments, corporations, everything, ceased to exist in their current form. They wanted to break free from the systems of control that had long defined society. Marissa entered the room, a somber expression on her face. Elon, you need to see this, she said, handing him her tablet. On the screen, a video played. It was a message from the leader of the decentralized group, a face obscured in shadow but the voice unmistakably confident and charismatic. We are the people who will bring down the old order. We are the ones who will dismantle the governments, the corporations, the systems that have controlled you for so long. The time for change is now. Join us, and we will rebuild from the ashes. It's time for a new world. The video ended, and Marissa looked at Elon. This is bigger than we thought. They're gaining momentum. Their message is resonating with people who feel disenfranchised, people who believe the system is rigged against them. Elon nodded slowly. They're not wrong, he said, his voice low. The system is flawed. But tearing it down without offering something better is chaos. And chaos doesn't build a better future, it destroys everything. The next few days were a blur of meetings and strategy sessions. Elon and his team were working around the clock to understand how deep this ideological rift ran. They had started to see more signs of unrest, protests, clashes between groups with opposing beliefs, and growing violence in certain regions. Social media was filled with heated debates, with factions forming and radicalizing faster than anyone could track. Marissa walked into the meeting room, holding up her phone. Elon, there's something happening in London. A large protest just turned violent. The message of this group, whatever they're calling themselves, has spread there faster than we thought. Elon's mind raced. How many people? Thousands. They've blocked off streets and are demanding that the government dissolve. They're claiming they're the true voice of the people. Marissa's voice trembled with concern. It's spreading. Elon stared at the screen in disbelief. This is just the beginning, isn't it? We've been warning about the power of ideas, Marissa replied. But we never thought it would spiral this quickly. Back at the headquarters, Elon paced in his office, trying to make sense of everything. His mind was a whirlwind of ideas and possibilities. He had always believed in the power of technology to change the world, to create a better future. But now, it seemed that the very tools that had once connected people were being used to tear everything apart. The SHIELD project had been designed to protect against cyber threats, to secure data and systems. But it had never been built to handle something like this, an ideological war, a war for hearts and minds. The digital landscape was no longer just a tool for communication, it had become the front line of a new kind of battle. And it was a battle that could not be won with just technology. Elon convened a meeting with his closest advisors. The air in the room was thick with tension, as everyone tried to come to terms with the reality they were facing. We've been fighting hackers and criminals, Elon began, but this is different. This is an ideological war, and it's going to be hard to fight something that's fueled by belief. How do we fight a belief system that is rooted in anger, in disillusionment, in the desire for change? Kevin, the lead engineer, spoke up. It's not just anger, Elon. It's frustration. The system, as it is, doesn't work for everyone. People have seen the cracks, and now they're being exploited. Marissa added, the problem is that the message of this group isn't just against the system, it's against the very idea of systems themselves. They're pushing for a world without borders, without leaders. They're promising a future where everyone has equal power, where there's no hierarchy. Elon sat back in his chair, his mind racing. I understand why it's appealing. People feel helpless. They've watched as the world became more divided, more fractured. But this isn't the answer. A world without systems, without structure, would only breed more chaos, not peace. And yet, Marissa said, they're getting more people to listen. Every time a protest turns violent, it fuels their narrative. They're tapping into something deep, the desire for freedom, for a new way of life. Elon paused, deep in thought. We need to do more than just stop them. We need to offer a better way, a way forward that doesn't tear down the systems that keep us connected. But we also need to address the frustration, the inequality. If we don't, this divide will only get wider. As the days passed, Elon and his team worked tirelessly to develop a plan, not just to stop the group, but to address the underlying issues that were driving the unrest. They began developing initiatives focused on global equity, sustainability, and technological development, ideas that would bring people together, not divide them. But the task ahead of them was enormous. The ideological divide was deepening, and time was running out. Elon knew that the world was at a crossroads. There was no simple solution to the growing tensions, no quick fix to the anger that was sweeping through society. But Elon also knew one thing: the world needed hope. The question was, could he and his team provide it in time? Peace is not the absence of conflict, but the ability to cope with conflict by peaceful means. The weight of the world felt heavier on Elon's shoulders than ever before. As unrest continued to spread, Elon was left grappling with the harsh reality that the ideal future he had once envisioned, one where technology united an advanced society, had become increasingly elusive. The digital world that had once seemed so promising now felt like a ticking time bomb, ready to explode into chaos at any moment. Despite his best efforts to steer humanity toward progress, the ideological divide between those who wanted to tear down the old world and those who sought to rebuild it with technology had reached a boiling point. The SHIELD project, originally conceived as a defensive measure against digital manipulation, now felt like a desperate attempt to safeguard the very systems that were under siege. But there was one thing Elon had learned over the years: hope was often the most powerful weapon in the fight against despair. And even in the darkest of times, a glimmer of hope could turn the tide. The headquarters was quieter than usual. Most of the team had already left for the evening, but Elon couldn't bring himself to leave. His mind was consumed by the thought of the global unrest. The protests had only intensified over the past few weeks, and the decentralized group was now operating at a larger scale. They had allies, followers, and a growing influence in both the digital and real worlds. He stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office, gazing out at the sprawling city below. The lights of the city twinkled, but the shadows seemed deeper now. Every news cycle brought more violence, more chaos, more proof that the world was on the brink of collapse. But Elon refused to give up. He couldn't. Not after everything that had been built. Not after all the progress humanity had made. He had to find a way to bring people together. Marissa knocked on the door, entering without waiting for a response. Her face was drawn, the exhaustion of the past few months evident in her eyes. "Elon, we need to talk." He turned away from the window, his expression serious. "About what?" "About the peace talks," she said. "We're at a critical point. There's been pressure from the UN, from global leaders, to bring all parties to the table. We need to find a way to negotiate with the decentralized group before this turns into a full-blown civil war." Elon's gaze softened, though his mind was still spinning with the enormity of the situation. "You're right. But how do you negotiate with people who want to destroy everything? How do you find common ground with people who believe the world should be torn down to the ground?" Marissa sighed. "They're not all extremists, Elon. Many of the people following them are just angry. They're frustrated by the inequalities they've seen. They feel like the system has failed them. But that doesn't mean they want chaos." Elon rubbed his temples. "But what if the extremists are the ones leading the charge? What if they hijack the message and pull the rest of the world into their vision of destruction? We can't ignore them, but we can't let them be the voice of the entire movement either," Marissa said. "If we don't act soon, we risk losing the middle ground. We need a way to show people that there's a path forward that doesn't involve total destruction." Elon nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. He couldn't ignore the truth in her words. If the world didn't find a way to move forward, it would collapse into chaos. But how could he lead such a movement, when the voices of destruction seemed so loud? The peace talks were scheduled to take place in Geneva, and Elon had agreed to attend. Despite the growing tension, there was a small chance that dialogue could break the cycle of violence. The idea of negotiating with the leaders of the decentralized group was daunting, but Elon knew it was the only way forward. As the day of the talks approached, the media coverage grew more intense. News outlets around the world covered the unrest, fueling public fear and uncertainty. The decentralized group, now calling themselves the Architects, had promised that if their demands were not met, they would escalate their actions. They had already made good on their threats, sabotaging key infrastructures and causing mass disruptions. Elon's role at the peace talks wasn't as a negotiator, but rather as a symbol. He represented technology's potential to heal, to bring people together. But with every passing day, the world seemed to move further away from that ideal. On the morning of the peace talks, Elon boarded a private jet to Geneva. As he settled into his seat, his mind raced through the possible outcomes. What would these talks achieve? Could they truly find a way to reconcile such opposing worldviews? Or was this all just a futile attempt to delay the inevitable? As the jet flew across the Atlantic, Elon found himself reflecting on his own journey. From the early days of Tesla and SpaceX, to the creation of the SHIELD project, everything had always been driven by the belief that technology could change the world. But now, he was wondering if the world had changed too much for technology to keep up. Geneva was cold and overcast the day the peace talks began. The atmosphere was tense as representatives from various governments, corporations, and factions gathered in the conference room. Elon arrived with Marissa, Kevin, and a few trusted members of his team, all of them trying to suppress the nervous energy in the air. The leader of the decentralized group, the man known only as the architect, was a shadowy figure who remained unseen, communicating only through encrypted messages and video feeds. His representatives, however, were present, sitting across from Elon and the other negotiators. They were an eclectic group, ranging from former tech insiders to self-proclaimed revolutionaries. They all shared a common belief in dismantling the existing systems, but beyond that, their motivation seemed unclear. Elon took a deep breath as the first session began. The stakes couldn't be higher. The world was watching, and whatever happened here could decide the future of society. For hours, the discussions dragged on, punctuated by heated exchanges and frustrated outbursts. There were moments when Elon thought the talks might collapse entirely. The architects refused to back down on their core demand, the dissolution of the existing global order. In their eyes, there could be no true peace without the total disintegration of the current power structures. But then, just as the talk seemed about to fall apart, Elon stood up. "Look," he said, his voice firm yet calm. "I understand why you want to tear everything down. I get the anger, the frustration. But destroying everything isn't the answer. We can't just dismantle the systems that have connected us, because if we do, we're left with nothing. We need to build something better together, not tear each other apart." His words hung in the air for a moment, before the room fell into an uneasy silence. And then, slowly, something remarkable happened. One of the representatives from the decentralized group spoke up. Maybe we don't need to destroy everything. Maybe we can rebuild it, piece by piece. But it has to start with trust. We can't move forward without that." It wasn't a complete resolution, but it was a step forward. A fragile peace had been reached. The talks continued for several more days, but the outcome was clear: while there was no immediate resolution, the conversations had opened doors. The world hadn't collapsed into chaos, not yet. But Elon knew that this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey. The road to peace would be anything but smooth, and the divides would not easily be healed. In times of crisis, alliances are formed not by convenience, but by necessity. The peace talks had ended, but the road to reconciliation was just beginning. The fragile agreement reached in Geneva did not eliminate the underlying tensions. Instead, it marked the start of a slow, painstaking process of rebuilding trust. Across the globe, people watched as their leaders attempted to navigate this delicate balance between chaos and order. The media had painted the talks as a success, but Elon knew better. It wasn't a resolution, it was a temporary truce, and in the world of global politics, temporary meant anything but permanent. The forces of division were still out there, and their voices had only grown louder. However, in the quiet aftermath, there was one silver lining: alliances had started to form, unexpected ones, forged by necessity. As Elon boarded his private jet back to Silicon Valley, he found himself contemplating the unexpected turns his life had taken. He had always believed in the power of technology to solve problems, to unite people, but this had proven to be much more complicated than he had ever imagined. Still, something within him remained hopeful. Perhaps this crisis would be the catalyst for a new era of cooperation, a chance for old enemies to put aside their differences for the greater good. The first sign of shifting alliances came from an unlikely source, Michael Turner, the head of the world's largest tech conglomerate, and once one of Elon's fiercest competitors. Turner had been vocal in his opposition to Elon's earlier initiatives, especially the SHIELD project, which he deemed an overreach of technological power. But now, as the world teetered on the brink of an ideological fracture, Turner was making overtures to work with Elon in the fight for global stability. Elon, Turner's voice crackled through the phone as Elon sat in his office, I think it's time we have a real conversation. You and I, working together. I know we've had our differences, but this situation has grown beyond competition. The stakes are too high. Elon raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and skepticism in his expression. What are you proposing, Michael? Turner's tone was unusually serious. I'm talking about a joint initiative, a global tech platform, not just a tool for communication, but a tool for global governance. Something that can ensure stability, prevent further chaos. We both know we can't keep going down the path of division. If we want to protect the future, we need to make sure we're not just battling against each other, but fighting for a common cause. Elon leaned back in his chair, processing the unexpected proposal. Michael Turner had never been one to concede easily, let alone make offers to collaborate. But the urgency in his voice was unmistakable. I'll consider it, Elon finally said. But I need to know you're serious. This isn't about profits, Michael. This is about saving the world. I know, Turner replied, his voice softening. I've seen enough destruction already. Despite his initial doubts, Elon began to entertain the possibility. The idea of a global tech platform, one that could influence governance, create stable channels for communication, and address the needs of the people, was revolutionary. And Turner's experience in global infrastructure could provide the stability that Elon's innovations in space travel, AI, and energy could not. As the weeks passed, discussions between the two men became more frequent. They began to sketch out the framework of what they would call the global nexus, a shared platform that would combine the best of technology, governance, and transparency, designed not to control but to empower. The plan was ambitious, and its success was far from guaranteed, but Elon saw the potential for it to be the unifying force the world so desperately needed. However, even as alliances between old rivals formed, there were still those who resisted. The architects, the decentralized group that had sparked the global unrest, were not going to go down quietly. Their leader, who still operated behind the veil of anonymity, had made it clear that they would not accept a solution built on the old systems. In an encrypted message released to their followers, the architect declared, the so-called global nexus is nothing more than another system of control. They would have us believe that technology can save us, but we know better. We will not be silenced. We will not compromise. Their message resonated deeply with many of their followers, many of whom felt betrayed by the promise of the talks. They saw the proposed platform as another attempt to maintain the very systems of power they had fought against. The divide, it seemed, was only deepening. Back in Silicon Valley, tensions were high. The architects' refusal to negotiate was causing waves, and protests had erupted again in several major cities. But this time, something was different. The protests were not just against the status quo, they were directed at the very platform Elon and Turner were attempting to create. We're being demonized, Marissa said one evening as she walked into Elon's office, holding a tablet. This backlash is real. People don't trust us, and they don't trust the platform. Elon looked at the screen she was holding. It showed headlines from across the globe, tech giants conspire to control the world, the global nexus, a trap for the people. He sighed deeply. I knew there would be resistance. But this? This is something else. We're being painted as the enemy now. It's not just the architects, Marissa replied, her tone contemplative. There are factions in governments, too. People who believe that any attempt to unify global governance will eventually lead to dictatorship. Then we have to show them the truth, Elon said resolutely. This is not about control. It's about protection. If we don't come together, we're all going to fall apart. We have to make them see that. Despite the mounting opposition, Elon and Turner pressed on, refining their plans for the global nexus. Behind closed doors, they worked tirelessly, pushing for partnerships with global leaders, tech companies, and even former adversaries. The platform was still a work in progress, but with every passing day, more and more people began to see the potential for a unified future. But as the initiative began to gain traction, another unexpected alliance came into play. In a surprise move, the world's largest independent activist group, the Vanguard, reached out to Elon. The Vanguard had been vocal critics of both corporate power and government control, but they had grown disillusioned with the violence and destruction of the architects. Their leader, Jessica Harper, requested a meeting. "Elon," she said, sitting across from him in a private room, "I won't sugarcoat it. We've fought against the status quo for years. But I'm watching this world burn, and I'm starting to think maybe we've been going about it all wrong." Elon raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "The architects have a point, they want to tear the system down. But they're ignoring the real problems, the ones we've been fighting against for years. You're offering a different way forward, one that doesn't rely on control or force. If you're serious, we're willing to back you." Always been a thorn in the side of corporate and government elites, and their support could give the global nexus the legitimacy it needed. The shifting alliances were becoming a new force in the fight for the future. Old enemies were coming together, not because they had become friends, but because they recognized the urgency of the situation. The path ahead was still uncertain, and there were many who would continue to resist. But for the first time in a long while, Elon felt like they might just have a chance to unite the world once again. The most dangerous enemies are the ones you cannot see, the ones you don't know are pulling the strings. The global nexus was starting to take shape. Slowly but surely, the platform that Elon and Turner had envisioned was becoming a reality, a beacon of hope in a fractured world. They had built alliances, made deals with governments, and gained the support of influential activist groups. The peace talks had set the groundwork for a better future, and now, it seemed, the world was on the brink of a technological renaissance. But as they moved forward, there was an unsettling feeling in the air. It wasn't the protests or the critics who still called the project a power grab, it was something deeper, something more insidious. The closer they got to realizing their vision, the more Elon felt like they were being watched. And the more he understood, the more he realized that not everyone who was involved in the global network was working with them. In the quiet solitude of his office, Elon was reviewing the latest updates for the global nexus when an encrypted message appeared on his screen. It was short and to the point. "They know what you're building. They're coming." Elon frowned, staring at the message. He immediately traced the source of the message, no easy feat, considering the encryption used, but the trail disappeared almost as quickly as it had appeared. Whoever sent it was good. Too good. His thoughts raced. They know what we're building. Who could it be? The architects? Some rogue element within the Vanguard? Or, perhaps, something far worse. Meanwhile, in the shadows of the corporate world, power brokers and intelligence agencies had begun to take notice of the global nexus. They had been watching the rise of the platform with a mix of concern and curiosity. Some saw it as a potential tool for controlling the masses, others, more sinister figures, saw it as a threat to their long-held power. And one such figure had begun to make moves from behind the scenes, an anonymous player whose motives were far from clear. Elon's growing sense of unease was confirmed when he received an unexpected call the next evening. It was from Marissa. "Elon, we've got a problem," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "One of our security systems has been compromised. Someone's been tampering with the code. We're not sure who or how, but it's bad." "Compromised? How bad are we talking?" Elon asked, his heart pounding. "Worse than we thought," Marissa replied. "We've been tracking a series of data leaks. There's a pattern to it. It looks like someone's been feeding our algorithms with false information, subtly manipulating the direction of the platform. It's almost like they've been shaping the foundation of the Nexus from the inside. Elon's blood ran cold. So, someone's infiltrated our system? It's not just a hack, Elon. It's deeper than that. Whoever's behind this is playing a long game. We've only just scratched the surface. I'm sending a team to investigate, but we need to act fast. The next few days were filled with tense meetings and rapid responses. Elon and his team worked around the clock to identify the source of the breach, but every lead they followed seemed to dissipate into thin air. Whoever was behind the manipulation had covered their tracks well. But the more they dug, the more they realized something else. This wasn't just about undermining the global nexus. It was about something far larger, an orchestrated effort to control the very infrastructure of the modern world. Late one night, as Elon sat alone in his office, a new piece of information arrived, a cryptic message from an anonymous source. This time, it was different. The message contained a single line of code that, when analyzed, led to a hidden network, one that had been active for years, lying dormant in the shadows of the internet. It was a network that had been manipulating global systems from behind the scenes, shaping political outcomes, corporate decisions, and even societal movements. Whoever controlled it had the power to alter the course of history. Elon's hands trembled as he stared at the screen. This was bigger than anything he had imagined. The global nexus was not just a project to connect the world, it was a linchpin in a game far older and more dangerous than he had realized. And someone was playing that game to manipulate everything. The next morning, Elon called a meeting with Turner, Marissa, and a few of his most trusted tech experts. He explained what he had discovered, the anonymous message, and the hidden network that seemed to be pulling strings from the shadows. Turner was immediately concerned. This sounds like a deep state operation. Could it be the government? Marissa shook her head. No, this isn't just one government. This is global. This is something much bigger. Elon nodded grimly. We've been too focused on the obvious threats, the architects, the protests. We never considered that someone could be pulling the strings from behind the scenes, using our own system against us. As the investigation continued, they discovered that the network wasn't just manipulating code, it was influencing the minds of world leaders, subtly shifting public opinion, and engineering events to keep the world in a constant state of crisis. It was feeding on fear, division, and distrust. The more Elon uncovered, the more disturbing it became. This was no ordinary group of hackers or extremists. This was a well-organized, shadowy collective that had been manipulating the flow of information for years. They were the unseen hand, controlling everything from the shadows. Elon's mind raced as he realized the truth. The peace talks, the global unrest, even the rise of the architects, these weren't isolated events. They were part of a larger plan, orchestrated by an invisible enemy who had been carefully shaping the world for their own purposes. But now that they knew, they had a choice: they could keep fighting the obvious threats, or they could go after the real enemy, the ones who had been controlling the game from the very beginning. With the weight of this new knowledge on his shoulders, Elon made a decision. He would stop running. He would stop hiding. It was time to confront the unseen hand and take back control of the future. But how? And who could he trust? As he prepared to move forward, a chilling thought crept into his mind: the people he thought he could trust, Turner, Marissa, even his own team, could any of them be compromised? Was anyone truly safe? When you can no longer trust the people around you, the only thing you can trust is the truth. Elon sat at the head of the conference table, his gaze fixed on the holographic map projected before him. The global nexus had become more than just a platform, it had become the battlefield of a war that was being fought in the shadows. The peace talks, the alliances, the betrayals, it was all part of a grand game, a game with stakes higher than anyone had ever anticipated. The true enemy, the one that had been pulling the strings from the shadows, was still out there. And it was only a matter of time before they struck again. For weeks, Elon had been gathering intel, tracing every lead and uncovering the layers of manipulation that had been buried deep within the global network. The deeper he dug, the more he realized just how vast and intricate the conspiracy was. The architects, the vanguard, even governments, everyone had been pawns in a larger scheme, controlled by a hidden force. But who were they? And why had they chosen to target the global nexus? It was then that Marissa brought him a breakthrough, a name. "Elon, I think we've finally found the one behind it all," she said, her voice calm but laced with urgency. She slid a tablet across the table, revealing an encrypted file with a single name at the top, the Syndicate. The Syndicate. Elon had heard whispers about them in the past, rumors of a shadow organization that controlled global finance, politics, and technology. But until now, it had been nothing more than a myth, a bogeyman used to explain the world's most inexplicable events. "Who are they?" Elon asked, his voice low. "An elite group of the world's most powerful figures," Marissa explained. "Corporate moguls, world leaders, tech giants, intelligence operatives, they've been operating in the shadows for decades. Their goal is simple: control. They manipulate global events to suit their own needs, and they have the power to make entire governments fall or rise at will." Elon felt a cold chill run down his spine. He had been up against powerful people before, rivals, competitors, even governments. But this was different. The Syndicate was not just a group of individuals, it was an organization that operated on a scale he could barely comprehend. And now, they were coming for him. The realization hit him hard: the global nexus wasn't just a tool for unity, it was a threat to their entire system of control. If it succeeded, it would break their stranglehold on the world. They couldn't allow that to happen. "We need to act fast," Elon said, his voice now filled with determination. "We can't let them take the nexus from us." Marissa nodded, already scanning through the files. "I've traced their operations to a private island off the coast of the Caribbean. It's heavily guarded, and all communications are encrypted. But we can't just storm the island. They've set up a fail-safe, a network of satellites that will trigger an immediate global blackout if anyone gets too close." Elon clenched his fists. "So they want to control not just information, but access to it. If we're going to do this, we need to neutralize their communication channels first." The clock was ticking. Elon knew that every second they wasted brought them closer to the Syndicate's ultimate plan. He called Turner, Marissa, and a select group of trusted allies for a final meeting. The plan was risky, but it was the only chance they had. "We infiltrate the Syndicate's communication network, take control of their satellites, and disable their fail-safe systems," Elon explained. "Once we have control, we expose them for the world to see. No more shadows. No more manipulation. We take back control of the future." "But how do we get to them without triggering their defenses?" Turner asked, his voice skeptical. "We don't go in guns blazing," Elon replied. "We go in with precision. We'll use the global nexus as a Trojan horse. We'll insert a backdoor into their communications system and use it to infiltrate their networks undetected." With the plan set in motion, the team worked around the clock, building a covert infiltration system within the nexus that would allow them to gain access to the Syndicate's infrastructure without being noticed. It was a high-risk move, but it was the only way to get close to their enemies without alerting them. The night of the operation, Elon stood on the balcony of his penthouse, staring out at the city skyline. The world seemed peaceful from up here, but he knew better. Beneath the surface, everything was on the edge of collapse. And he was the only one who could stop it. "Are you ready?" Marissa's voice came from behind him. Elon turned to face her. "I've never been more ready in my life." The mission began as planned. Elon and his team infiltrated the Syndicate's private island under the cover of darkness, using the backdoor they had inserted into their communication systems to stay one step ahead. It was a silent operation, no explosions, no dramatic showdowns. Every movement was calculated, every decision carefully timed. But as they got closer to their target, something unexpected happened. One of their own, a member of the team who had been trusted implicitly, turned on them. "I'm sorry," the traitor whispered, as he pulled a weapon from his side. "But this is bigger than any of us. The syndicate can't be stopped." Elon's heart sank as the betrayal unfolded before him. It was a moment he never expected, a moment that shattered the illusion of trust that had kept them all together. But he couldn't afford to dwell on it. The mission was still the priority. If they failed, the syndicate would win. In a split second, the traitor was neutralized. But the damage was done. The syndicate had been alerted. The game was no longer about subtlety, it was about survival. As the final battle played out on the island, Elon and his team fought their way to the syndicate's central control hub. The room was like something out of a dystopian movie, screens flashing, servers humming, and a lone figure sitting at the heart of it all. "Welcome, Mr. Musk," the figure said, his voice calm and calculating. "I've been expecting you." Elon's pulse quickened as he recognized the face. It was someone he had trusted, someone who had been with him from the beginning. "You?" Elon breathed. "You're the one behind all of this?" The figure smiled coldly. "You didn't think the syndicate was just a collection of powerful individuals, did you? It's a system. And I built it." The final moments of the battle were a blur. But in the end, Elon and his team succeeded. They neutralized the syndicate's control, exposed their operations to the world, and took back the global nexus. As the dust settled and the world watched in shock, Elon realized that the fight was far from over. The syndicate may have fallen, but their legacy of manipulation and control would take much longer to erase. The world would change, but it would take time to rebuild the trust that had been lost. And as the cameras flashed and the world celebrated the end of an era, Elon Musk knew that the true battle was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?